The city of Atlanta had always been a place where the old rubbed shoulders with the new. Towering skyscrapers stood tall, casting their shadows over cobblestone streets and houses that had stood for more than a century. It was here, in this city of history and progress, that the Carter family built their life. The Carters were not the wealthiest family in Georgia, but they were known, respected. Their name carried weight. For generations, the Carters owned land, businesses, and properties that stretched across neighborhoods. And at the center of that legacy was a sprawling piece of land, and on it, a mansion that had once been a jewel but now sat in silence, its windows dark, its walls cracked with age. To most, it was nothing more than a relic of a past time. To the Carters, it was a piece of their history. Henry Carter, the patriarch, and his wife Margaret were proud people. They had raised their 3 children, Michael, Rebecca, and Claire, with all the privileges that came with their family's name. Yet, beneath their wealth and reputation, Henry and Margaret carried something more valuable: compassion. It was compassion that led them, years ago, to adopt a little girl who had been left without a family. A black child, not even a year old, abandoned to a system that rarely gave children like her a fair chance. Her name was Naomi. From the moment Naomi entered the Carter household, Henry and Margaret loved her as if she had been born from their own blood. They gave her a name, a home, and a family. They gave her more than what life had once promised her. But though the parents embraced her, not everyone in that grand old house welcomed her the same. Michael, Rebecca, and Claire, the Carter siblings, smiled when their parents watched, called Naomi sister in the presence of guests, and acted as though they cherished her. But when the doors closed and the parents' eyes turned away, their smiles vanished. What remained were words sharp enough to wound, laughter meant to belittle, and insults whispered in hallways. Naomi often walked alone. To them, Naomi was not a sister. She was an outsider, a servant in their eyes, someone they could mock and humiliate in secret. And yet Naomi endured. She grew up learning to hide her pain. She found comfort in small things: the gentle way Margaret would smooth her hair, the pride in Henry's voice when he told her she was capable of great things, and the quiet moments in the old mansion when she could imagine herself as someone who truly belonged. Henry and Margaret were not blind. They saw the way their 3 children treated Naomi when they thought no one was watching. They noticed the sharp tones, the dismissive glances, the little cruelties. And though it broke their hearts, they knew one truth that haunted them. What would become of Naomi after they were gone? This question lingered in their hearts like a storm cloud. They wanted Naomi to be safe, to be protected, to inherit not just their love but also their security. So they began to plan. They would ensure that when the time came, Naomi would not be left at the mercy of her siblings' cruelty. The old decrepit mansion, abandoned by most, dismissed as worthless, suddenly became central to their plan. Its true value was hidden, known only to them and a select few. And in that secret they found their answer. Naomi's future would be secured. What no one knew, not even Naomi herself, was that the old house she wandered through as a child, the house where she felt the whispers of history around her, was worth more than anyone could imagine. But until that truth was revealed, Naomi would have to endure the cruelty of her siblings, the pain of being seen as less, and the weight of a life where love was always contested. And as the Carter story unfolded, the world would see that what was once mocked as worthless could become the very crown jewel of a legacy. Naomi Carter grew up in the shadows of privilege. Her siblings wore their last name like a crown, boasting of who they were, where they came from, and what they would one day inherit. For Michael, the eldest, it meant power. For Rebecca, it meant status. And for Claire, the youngest, it meant protection. She never feared the world because her family name shielded her. But for Naomi, things were different. Though her last name was the same, the weight it carried was different for her. People noticed it in the way they looked at her when the family attended church. They noticed it when she walked through stores beside her parents. Some eyes softened with admiration, seeing a black girl raised by a white family in the South. Others hardened with suspicion, unable to understand, unwilling to accept. But what hurt most were not the stares of strangers. It was the laughter behind closed doors. Michael, who was always quick with words, found cruel joy in mocking Naomi's differences. "Don't forget your place," he would whisper when their parents weren't near. "You're lucky Mom and Dad let you stay here. Remember that." Rebecca, sharp-tongued and cold, treated Naomi like a shadow. She would smile at her parents and say, "Naomi is like a sister to me." But the moment the doors closed, she would toss her clothes toward Naomi and say, "Fold this. You're good at servant work anyway." Claire was the youngest, the one their parents often called sweet. But even she, shielded by innocence, copied her siblings. She joined their mocking laughter, repeated their words, and treated Naomi as though she were less than family. To the world, the Carters had 4 children. But inside the walls of their home, the 3 siblings made sure Naomi knew she was different. Still, Naomi never complained. When she felt the sting of their insults, she buried her face in her pillow and cried where no one could hear. When they laughed at her skin, her hair, her presence, she whispered to herself the words her mother once said, "You are ours. You are mine." Margaret always saw Naomi's quiet suffering. She would often sit beside her at night, stroking her hair. "Don't let them break your spirit," she'd say softly. "You are loved. More than you know." Henry, too, would often take Naomi's hand, looking her in the eyes. "You are strong," he'd tell her. "The world may not see it yet, but one day they will." It was those words, spoken with conviction, that kept Naomi going. Still, Henry and Margaret's hearts ached. They had given Naomi a name, a family, a life. But they could not change the cruelty in their children's hearts. They could not guarantee Naomi's siblings would ever accept her. And so, in the quiet of their room, Henry and Margaret would speak late into the night. "What will happen when we're gone?" Margaret whispered one evening. Henry's face was grave. "We can't change how the others treat her, but we can secure her future." And in that moment they made their decision. They would rewrite the will. They would make sure Naomi was not left with scraps or silence. They would give her something greater than gold. Something that her siblings would overlook, mock, and despise. But in the end, would secure her life forever. The old mansion, the one property everyone thought worthless. It was a secret waiting to be revealed. And though Naomi had no idea, her life was already being written for a destiny she could not yet see. As the years passed, Naomi blossomed into a young woman. She was quiet but resilient, gentle in her nature but strong in ways no one around her truly understood. She learned to move through the world with patience, even when her heart was heavy. But Henry and Margaret Carter noticed. They noticed the way Naomi's eyes sometimes lowered when her siblings laughed. They noticed the way she carried herself differently, careful, cautious, as though she didn't want to take up too much space in a home that was supposed to be hers. They noticed because they loved her, and in that love they carried a fear. Late at night, when the house was still and the children slept, Henry and Margaret often sat together in their room, the weight of unspoken worries pressing down on them. "She never says a word," Margaret whispered one evening, her voice breaking. "She hides it. But I see it, Henry. The way they treat her. The way they make her feel like she doesn't belong." Henry sighed heavily, leaning back in his chair. His hair had grown grayer, his hands more tired with age, but his heart remained sharp. "I see it too. She's strong, Margaret. Stronger than any of them realize. But strength alone won't protect her when we're gone." Margaret's eyes welled with tears. What happens when it's just her and them? What happens when they have no reason to pretend anymore? Henry's silence was answer enough. He had thought about it too. The Carter siblings, Michael, Rebecca, and Claire, were their blood, but their hearts were clouded with envy and pride. He had no illusions that they would treat Naomi with kindness once their parents' watchful eyes were no longer there. It was then, in those quiet nights, that Henry made a decision. They would protect Naomi in the only way they could, by securing her future. "We'll change the will," Henry said firmly. "We'll make sure she is safe, no matter what they think of her." Margaret hesitated, wiping her tears. "But if they know, if they see we've given her more than them, it'll only fuel their resentment." "They don't need to know," Henry replied. "Not until it's time." And so they crafted their plan in secret. Among all the properties, businesses, and wealth the Carters owned, there was one piece no one wanted: the old mansion. Its windows were cracked, its paint chipped, its roof sagging from years of neglect. The siblings laughed at it, dismissing it as a burden, a ruin. But Henry and Margaret knew its secret. The land the mansion sat on had risen in value year after year, quietly becoming the most prized property in their portfolio. Developers had made offers worth more than anything their other children could ever imagine. But Henry and Margaret never sold. They held on to it, knowing one day it would be Naomi's shield. "She'll think it's nothing at first," Margaret said softly. "They'll mock her for it. They'll humiliate her. But when the truth comes out," Henry nodded, "she'll have more than enough. She'll have her future secured, and they'll have no power to take it away." The thought gave them comfort, even as their worry lingered. Because deep down, Henry and Margaret knew that no inheritance, no mansion, no wealth could protect Naomi from the cruelty of her siblings. But at least it would give her the strength to stand on her own. And so, in the silence of their home, the parents' love for their adopted daughter was sealed into paper and ink, a hidden promise, a quiet safeguard. Naomi, unaware of the storm ahead, lived her days as best as she could, never knowing that her parents had already prepared for the battles she would one day face alone. Life has a way of changing in a single moment. For Naomi, that moment came on a rainy night when headlights cut across a slick Georgia road. Henry and Margaret Carter, her protectors, her anchor, the only shield she had against the cruelty of her siblings, were gone in an instant. Car accident. A tragedy that shattered not just Naomi's heart, but the fragile balance of the Carter household. Naomi was 24, old enough to understand loss, old enough to feel the weight of loneliness press down on her chest, but still too young to carry the burden of being completely alone in a house filled with people who never wanted her. The funeral was grand, attended by neighbors, business associates, and friends who came to honor the respected Carter couple. Their children stood together, dressed in black, faces composed for the world to see. To the guests, they looked like a grieving family united in sorrow. But behind the solemn faces, bitterness and cruelty waited like wolves in the shadows. When the last guest left and the house grew quiet, Naomi felt the shift immediately. The kindness her siblings once pretended to show vanished. The fake smiles were gone. There were no more gentle words spoken for their parents' sake. Instead, what remained was sharp laughter, sneers, and the unmistakable sound of doors slamming in her face. "You're not one of us," Michael told her coldly one night. His voice carried the authority of being the eldest, the one who now considered himself head of the family. "Don't think Mom and Dad's charity makes you a Carter. You were never really family." Rebecca followed his lead. Her words cut deep, laced with venom disguised as casual remarks. "Honestly, I don't even know why they kept you around. You're nothing but a reminder that they pitted someone who didn't belong here." Even Claire, the youngest, the one who once trailed after Naomi in childhood, begging to play, turned away from her. Now, she parroted the cruelty of her older siblings, her laughter ringing like a dagger in Naomi's ears. Naomi endured. She always had. But the silence of her parents' absence made every insult louder, every cruelty sharper. The house, once filled with love from Henry and Margaret, became hostile ground. Naomi found herself isolated, eating meals alone, her footsteps echoing through hallways where whispers followed her like shadows. And yet, there was one thing her siblings could not take from her: the will. The Carters had left behind not just memories, but instructions. Their estate was to be divided among their children, but with one unusual stipulation. The will would not be opened until the youngest Carter child, Claire, reached the age of 25. And Claire, at the time of her parents' death, was just 24 and a half. 6 months. Naomi had to endure 6 months in a house that no longer wanted her. 6 months surrounded by siblings who made her survival unbearable. 6 months until the truth her parents had hidden would finally come to light. Her siblings, of course, had their own expectations. "They'll never give you anything," Michael sneered one evening. "The will's for us, not you. You'll be out on the streets the moment it's read." Rebecca smirked, her eyes cold. "Did you really think charity makes you an heir? You're nothing more than a guest who overstayed her welcome." Naomi said nothing. She held her tongue. She endured the cruelty, the insults, the laughter that followed her everywhere she went. But deep down, her parents' words echoed like a lifeline. "You are strong. The world may not see it yet, but one day, they will." Naomi didn't know what her parents had planned. She didn't know about the mansion or its worth. All she knew was that she had 6 months to survive in a house that had never truly been hers. 6 months until everything changed. 6 months. It may not sound long, but when each day is filled with bitterness, 6 months can feel like a lifetime. For Naomi, every sunrise in the Carter household became a reminder that she was alone. Her siblings, emboldened by the absence of their parents, no longer bothered to hide their disdain. The walls that once echoed with her parents' comforting words now carried laughter at her expense. Michael, the eldest, turned into a tyrant. He barked orders at Naomi as though she were a servant. "Clean the study," he'd demand. "Don't touch Dad's books. You'll ruin them." His words weren't requests. They were commands, meant to belittle her. Rebecca, always sharper than her brother, found joy in humiliation. She would toss her expensive clothes onto Naomi's bed and say, "Make yourself useful. Iron these. It's what you're good at." And when Naomi did, Rebecca would smirk and add, "See, you fit the role perfectly." Claire, the youngest, had once looked up to Naomi, but now she mimicked her siblings, laughing at every insult, adding her own petty jabs. "You know, when the will is read, you'll be out on the street," she'd say casually, sipping tea. "I mean, you can't really believe Mom and Dad would give you anything, right? You're not their blood." The words cut deep, but Naomi never let them see her tears. At night, she cried silently into her pillow, whispering prayers into the darkness. She thought of her parents, of the gentle way Margaret's hands had held her face, of Henry's voice reminding her that she was strong. Those memories became her shield, her armor against the cruelty that surrounded her. But her siblings' cruelty was relentless. Some days, they locked the door to the dining room, eating together while Naomi sat in the kitchen, alone. Other days, they invited friends over and made jokes at her expense, laughing while Naomi sat in the corner, pretending she couldn't hear. And yet Naomi endured. She endured because she knew the will was coming. She endured because, deep in her heart, she believed her parents would not leave her with nothing. She endured because survival was something she had always known. The 6 months crawled by, each day heavier than the last. And as Claire's 25th birthday drew near, the house buzzed with anticipation. Michael spoke of the businesses he would expand. Rebecca dreamed of luxury vacations and new properties. Claire, finally of age, boasted about how the will would cement her place in society. And Naomi? She stayed silent, watching, waiting. She didn't know what her future held. She only knew one thing. The day of the will was coming. The truth, whatever it was, would soon be revealed. And though her siblings expected her downfall, Naomi held on to hope that her parents' love had not been in vain. The morning of the will reading arrived with a strange stillness. The Carter mansion, usually alive with chatter and footsteps, felt tense, as though the very walls were holding their breath. Naomi woke before dawn, her stomach knotted, her heart heavy with the weight of the unknown. She dressed simply, a modest navy dress her mother had once bought for her, its fabric worn but still neat. She stood before the mirror, touching the pendant Margaret had given her on her 18th birthday. A quiet reminder, you belong here. Downstairs, her siblings were already gathered. Michael, in his tailored suit, wore the smug expression of a man who believed the world belonged to him. Rebecca, draped in designer silk, looked as though she were attending a coronation. Claire, vibrant and restless, couldn't hide her excitement. When Naomi entered the room, the laughter dulled. The air shifted. Rebecca smirked. Well, the stray decides to join us, she said. Naomi said nothing. She simply sat in the corner, away from the grand mahogany table where her siblings lounged. A short while later, the family attorney, Mr. Whitman, arrived. His presence carried authority, his steps firm as he set his briefcase on the table. With him came silence. Good morning, Mr. Whitman said, his voice steady, professional. We are gathered here, as per the wishes of the late Henry and Margaret Carter, to read their last will and testament. I trust you all understand the seriousness of this moment. Michael leaned back in his chair, smirking. Let's not waste time, Whitman. We already know how this will go. The attorney ignored him. He unfolded the papers carefully, his eyes scanning the room before he began to read. The will spoke first of love, of gratitude. Henry and Margaret's words filled the room like a ghostly embrace. They spoke of their children's futures, their hopes for their legacies, their wish for unity among siblings. For a moment, Naomi's heart ached. Hearing their voices again, even through written words, was almost too much to bear. Then came the distributions. To Michael, the eldest, Henry and Margaret left control of certain family businesses, though with stipulations. To Rebecca, they left a portion of properties carefully detailed. To Claire, funds set aside for her independence, ensuring she would never want for security. Each sibling straightened, satisfied, nodding at the fairness of it all. Their parents had done as expected. But then Mr. Whitman paused. He cleared his throat, his gaze landing on Naomi. And to Naomi Carter, he began, his voice deliberate, steady. We leave the Carter estate, the primary residence, and majority shares in the Carter holdings. This decision was made after much consideration, for she has shown unwavering character, humility, and strength in the face of hardship. We trust her to honor our legacy with dignity. The room fell silent. Naomi's heart stopped. Her breath caught in her chest. She gripped the edge of her chair, her ears ringing as though she hadn't heard correctly. Michael shot upright. What? His voice cracked with fury. Rebecca gasped, her face draining of color. Claire's mouth fell open, words refusing to form. Mr. Whitman continued calmly. Your parents were clear in their wishes. While all of you have received your share, it is Naomi who shall inherit the estate and hold majority authority. This was their final word. Rebecca slammed her hand on the table. This is absurd. She's not even one of us. Enough, Mr. Whitman said sharply. This will was written with full knowledge of Naomi's place in this family. Your parents' decision stands. Naomi sat frozen, tears welling in her eyes. Not out of greed, not out of triumph, but out of the overwhelming truth that her parents had seen her. Truly seen her. They had chosen her. The siblings erupted into chaos. Voices raised, accusations hurled, anger spilling like fire. But Naomi didn't move. She didn't argue. She sat quietly, her hand resting on the pendant around her neck, feeling her mother's presence in that moment. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe. The will had spoken. The truth was out. Her parents' love had not abandoned her. It had built her a foundation stronger than her siblings' hatred. But she knew this was only the beginning. Their resentment would only grow, and Naomi's fight for survival was far from over. The reading of the will had ended, but its echoes lingered like a thunderclap. Mr. Whitman packed his papers neatly, unaffected by the storm raging around the Carter children. Michael's fists clenched against the table, Rebecca's face twisted with fury, and Claire's restless energy turned venomous. Naomi sat in silence, her heart still trembling. As soon as the attorney left, the room erupted. "You don't deserve any of this," Michael roared, his face flushed red with rage. He jabbed a finger at Naomi. "Our parents must have been tricked. Lied to. There's no way they'd hand over the estate to you." Rebecca sneered, her words dripping with venom. "They pitied you, that's all. Don't get too comfortable. You don't belong here and you never will." Claire folded her arms, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "This isn't fair. We worked, we bled for this family name, and what did she do? Sweep floors? Cook meals?" Her laugh was bitter, cruel. "And now she's supposed to be our equal?" Naomi finally stood. Her voice trembled, not from weakness, but from the weight of years of swallowed pain. "I never asked for any of this," she said softly. "I never wanted to be in competition with you. I only wanted to be your sister." Michael slammed his hand on the table, making her flinch. "Don't you dare play the victim. You think a piece of paper makes you a Carter? You'll never be one of us. Never." The words cut deep, not because they were new, but because they had been her reality since childhood. Always the outsider, always the servant in their eyes. Rebecca leaned closer, her tone sharp as a blade. "Enjoy your little victory while it lasts. That house, that fortune, it won't protect you forever. Sooner or later you'll be alone again. And then we'll see how far that inheritance takes you." Naomi's lips pressed together. She could taste the bitterness of their hatred, but she refused to let it break her. Her parents had trusted her for a reason. She raised her chin and whispered, almost to herself, "I belong here. They knew it, even if you never did." The siblings scoffed, rolling their eyes, but behind their anger lay something darker, fear. For the first time, the balance of power had shifted, and they were no longer in control. In the days that followed, life inside the mansion grew unbearable. Michael barked orders louder than ever, as though he could reclaim dominance by sheer force. Rebecca spread whispers among the extended family, painting Naomi as manipulative. Claire plotted quietly, her eyes always calculating. Every meal was tense. Every hallway felt hostile. Naomi's steps echoed alone in a house that once felt like home. And yet she endured. At night, she sat by the cracked fireplace in the decrepit mansion she now owned, the property everyone mocked. Dust coated the furniture, paint peeled from the walls, and the air smelled of damp neglect. But to Naomi, it wasn't just a broken house. It was a promise. She remembered her father's hand on her shoulder. "Strength isn't in the wealth you hold, Naomi, but in the heart you carry." She remembered her mother's voice. "This home will be yours one day. Take care of it as we took care of you." And so, she resolved to honor their trust. No matter how much her siblings mocked her, no matter how heavy their wrath weighed upon her, Naomi knew she was no longer the servant in the shadows. She was the heir, the chosen one, and her journey was only beginning. The weeks after the will reading felt like living in a battlefield. Naomi endured the glares, the cruel words, and the suffocating silence that followed her everywhere. Her siblings treated her inheritance as if it were some cruel joke, mocking the decrepit mansion she had received. Michael often scoffed, "Enjoy your haunted house, Naomi. Maybe you can rent it out for Halloween parties." Rebecca laughed, adding, "Servants deserve servant quarters. Looks like Mom and Dad finally figured out your place." Claire smirked, Don't forget to sweep the cobwebs before you move in. Their words stung, but Naomi held her ground. She reminded herself, her parents had chosen her for a reason. And then came the day that would change everything. Mr. Whitman returned, this time carrying not only papers, but also a quiet smile. The siblings gathered once more, curious yet unbothered, believing the matter settled. He cleared his throat. I have one final clause from your parents' will to reveal. It concerns the Carter estate that Naomi has inherited. Michael rolled his eyes. What now? Another petty gift. But Mr. Whitman continued calmly. The Carter estate, though currently in a state of disrepair, sits on land appraised at over $2 billion. The property itself, once restored, will be worth even more. Additionally, Naomi has been allocated $1 million in liquid assets specifically designated for renovations. The room fell into stunned silence. Naomi's heart pounded in her chest. $2 billion? She had expected little more than a crumbling house, yet her parents had entrusted her with a fortune. Michael's mouth hung open, his face drained of color. Rebecca's teacup slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. Claire froze, her eyes wide as though she had seen a ghost. Their mockery turned to silence. Cold, heavy silence. Mr. Whitman glanced at Naomi, his voice softer now. Your parents wanted you to have not just security but power. They trusted your judgment, your resilience, and your heart. They believed you would preserve the Carter name with honor. Tears welled in Naomi's eyes. She lowered her head, whispering, Thank you, Mama, Papa. Her siblings, however, looked as though the ground had been ripped out from under them. Suddenly, the sister they had mocked as a servant was the wealthiest among them. The one they had tried to push aside was now the keeper of the family's greatest treasure. Rebecca stammered, Naomi, we were just joking before. You know that, right? We've always loved you. Michael forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Yes, of course. We're family, and family sticks together. Claire nodded quickly, her voice trembling. You'll need help restoring the mansion. We can be there for you. Naomi looked at them, her heart heavy. For years, she had longed for their acceptance, for the love they had denied her. And now here they were, faces pale, eyes desperate, words dripping with sudden sweetness. But she wasn't fooled. She thought of the years of cruelty, the insults whispered when no one else could hear, the loneliness she had carried like a shadow. And she thought of her parents, how they had seen her worth when no one else did. Naomi took a deep breath and spoke, her voice steady, strong. I forgive you. The words hung in the air, stunning them. But, she continued, forgiveness doesn't erase the past. You may be my siblings, but you'll never erase what you've done. I won't hate you, but I won't depend on you either. This inheritance, this life my parents entrusted to me, I will honor it with or without your approval. Her siblings sat in silence, their faces unreadable. Naomi rose from her chair, her shoulders squared, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She walked toward the door, pausing only once to look back. This mansion, she said quietly, isn't just a house. It's a symbol, a reminder that no matter how the world tries to break me, I will rise. Mama and Papa knew that, and now so do you. With that, Naomi left the room, her footsteps echoing like the closing of a chapter. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving. She was free. And though her siblings would never forget the day they mocked her only to see her rise above them, Naomi chose peace over bitterness. Because she had something they could never take away. Her parents' love, her dignity, and a future brighter than she ever imagined. The servant they had scorned had become the heir of it all.